We will get started in a minute or so. And as people are joining, we are happy to see you here, and we invite you to say hello to everyone else in the chat. Welcome to share where you are calling in today, any ROR memories or stories or updates. Hello and welcome everyone who's just joining. We'll get started in a moment. Great to see everyone here. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Welcome everyone just joining. Great to see all of you. We are doing some greetings and introductions in the chat, and we'll get started in about a minute. Greetings and welcome everyone just joining. Great to see you here. If you've just gotten into the Zoom, please feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself in chat. And we'll continue those introductions as we get started. I'm going to share a couple of brief notes and reminders as we kick off the session today. We are really happy that you're here, and we want all of you to have an informative and positive experience. So just want to encourage you to keep interacting in the chat. If you're just joining now, head on over to the chat and say hello to everyone. I also want to mention that we have a ROR code of conduct. We want to make sure that everyone has a productive and safe experience in sessions like these. So please make sure to follow the code of conduct, which we will post a link to in the chat in a moment. I also want to note this is a community call for all of you to celebrate ROR and the community that made it, and especially the people that make up the ROR community. So as such, we're not permitting AI bots to attend the session today. We have restricted them. If we notice any joining, we will go ahead and remove those from the Zoom. And lastly, to help make sure that you're having a great time today, we encourage you to have some fun in the spirit of ROR with lion and ROR themed backgrounds and emojis. And a couple of other notes about getting the most out of the Zoom tools today. We encourage you to raise your hand and unmute when you have a question. We encourage you to use your video if you feel comfortable, but it's not required. And I also want to point out that Zoom has a caption tool that you can use to show captions in a specific language if that's helpful for getting the most out of the session content. And final note from me, we will distribute the recording and the slides afterwards to everyone who registered and make them available on the ROR website and other channels. So again, welcome. I'm really excited to get this session started today. I'm seeing many familiar names and faces, also some new ones. For those that I haven't had a chance to get to know yet, my name is Maria Gould. I'm the director of ROR. I'm joined here today by the fabulous ROR team, who you will hear from throughout the course of the session. And we are here today to celebrate the milestone of 7 years of ROR and the ROR community. So the plan for today is to spend a little bit of time reflecting on where we are now, 7 years into ROR, look back at where ROR was 7 years ago. You'll hear from members of the team sharing more about what's going on with ROR right now and what the future is starting to look like. And then you will all have a chance to share some input and ideas and questions about what you want the future to look like or how ROR can help you succeed in the problems and challenges and opportunities that you are pursuing. And if you really want to maximize your ROR experience this week, this session is just one of several that we are doing to celebrate 7 years of ROR. So if you want to get more out of ROR this week, you can join us right after this session today. We're just going to stay on Zoom and hang out in chat with anybody who would like to stay. And then tomorrow we have 2 additional sessions, which are being linked in the chat right now, featuring a really amazing lineup of community panelists talking about key use cases that ROR is helping to address. One of those sessions is focused on funding metadata, and the other session is focused on national research strategies. So really, really exciting and important topics and presenters in those sessions. So please join us if you can. We will also be recording them and circulating those recordings and materials afterwards. All right, so today or this week, this time of year marks 7 years of ROR. It's a true privilege and honor to kick off this celebration. And my part today is just sharing a few comments and reflections on what brings us to this meeting today. Why are we here? So many of you will know we do lots of community calls throughout the year, and this one is a little different because it's our anniversary call and really to commemorate when we first launched ROR at an open community meeting in Dublin during Pitapalooza back in 2019. I know that some of you on the Zoom right now were at that meeting, so it's amazing that you're here again today. If you were there in Dublin when ROR first launched, please feel free to add a reaction on Zoom or put a message in chat and share a memory. And that moment in 2019 was the result of many years before that of community collaborations that led up to the launch of ROR. And the launch itself was very exciting. And after that point, we wanted to keep convening open community meetings in the spirit of ROR's aim to be a community-driven registry. So we started doing bi-monthly community calls. We established a number of community groups. We also started marking the anniversary of ROR's launch every year after to have a chance to come together as a community. First, we did this in person, and then we moved online with the onset of the pandemic. And we do this to celebrate another year and to reflect on the past, look ahead to the future, and to acknowledge everyone that has made all of this possible. So that's the broader context of why we are all gathered here today for this session. And as I look back personally on the past 7 years, I'm really struck by the fact that 2 things can be true at once. On the one hand, ROR today has actually changed very little for the better over the past 7 years. And on the other hand, ROR today is also very different than the ROR that came into existence 7 years ago. So what do I mean by that? So on the one hand, what hasn't changed is our commitment to a core set of a guiding vision and values that we live by every day. Number one, that we have this clear purpose and a defined scope focused on identifying research organizations. Number 2, that we are designing and building and offering a free and open service in alignment with the principles of open scholarly infrastructure. And number three, that we are designing and building and offering this as an initiative by, with, and for the global community. These are the guiding vision and values that that were part of ROR's origins, and they're still immensely embedded in everything that we do today, 7 years later. And on the other hand, over the past 7 years, and especially in the past year and the years right before that, ROR has changed a lot in terms of how we operate and in terms of what we have been able to offer while still staying true to that guiding vision and those guiding values. So we have successfully established a stable operating model and sustainability strategy for ROR that involves ongoing dedicated support from our three operating organizations, California Digital Library, Crossref, and DataSite, and with additional investments from community supporters. We have made adjustments over time to the registry scope to be able to include a wider range of organizations. We've updated the schema in response to community feedback. We've refined the service offerings, such as their API, to offer a higher quality, more reliable solution for our global user base. And we've seen growing recognition and adoption of ROR over the years as the default and trusted option for institutional level identification and information, addressing a wide range of use cases around the world. So you'll hear more about these particular developments from the rest of the team shortly. The key point that I want to make is that ROR keeps evolving and improving in line with the foundational principles and values that led to ROR 7 years ago, in line with the overarching framework of POSI and other guidelines around open scholarly infrastructure, and in line with ongoing community engagement and input from all of you here on this call and others who are not able to be here today. And so ROR is truly a collective effort, and we wouldn't be here today without all of the efforts that happened 7 years ago to get ROR started and all of the community support and input that we have benefited from since then. So I want to close this portion of the celebration today before handing it off to my colleagues to acknowledge all of those who have contributed along the way, and especially in the past year. So first of all, I want to give a shout out to the wonderful operators and advisors and everyone working so hard to make ROR happen on a daily basis and to provide guiding advice and guidance as we chart a path forward. So that is the ROR core team, who you'll hear from momentarily, the members of the ROR operating organizations that are supporting ROR, our steering group and our community curation advisory board, representing stakeholders from all around the world who help us make important decisions about the service offering and our curation model and metadata practices. I also want to acknowledge the very generous organizational supporters that have contributed funds to help ensure ROR's long-term sustainability strategy. Too many to call out by name here, but we will also post a link to this supporters page that's on our website to specifically acknowledge and appreciate their generosity. I want to give a shout out as well to the wonderful featured community presenters that have contributed use cases to the ROR blog and then have presented at community calls throughout the year to talk about what ROR means to them and the problems that ROR is helping to solve. And I want to celebrate and appreciate and express my gratitude to all of you, everyone who's here on this call today, everyone who's not able to make it. All of you have made this possible by your ongoing participation, your ongoing engagement and enthusiasm for the work that we do. And that takes many forms. We know many of you are able to join community calls. Not everyone can. That's okay. Many of you are helping us keep the registry data up to date by submitting requests to add and update registry records. Many of you are helping us refine the service offering and the quality of our technical infrastructure by reporting bugs and suggesting feature enhancements. You are integrating ROR into your system and your metadata. You are championing ROR and making sure that it's included in different research policies and guidelines. You're telling your colleagues and your friends about ROR. You're investing in ROR's sustainability. And overall, you are caring about this work and the impact that it has. And all of that deserves a tremendous amount of appreciation and acknowledgement. So thank you for making ROR possible. Thank you for being here to help us celebrate 7 years of ROR. Here's to many more years. I couldn't be more honored and thrilled to be marking this milestone. And I'm really excited now to turn it over to other colleagues on the ROR team for them to talk more about what we've been up to and the work that's coming up.
Thank you so much, Maria. Maria has just led ROR in a successful direction ever since the early days of ROR. We are very lucky to have her as the ROR director, and I always find her words very inspiring. Thank you. So yes, my name is Amanda French. I am Technical Community Manager for ROR, and I'm based at Crossref. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about who's using ROR and how and why, also known as ROR adoption. So who's using ROR? Well, in theory, it is part of my work to keep track of who's using ROR. And so I'm continually talking to software developers, to product managers, to metadata professionals, and asking if they're using ROR and asking how they're using ROR. We're always also keeping an eye out for mention of ROR in release notes and industry news generally. And we also search for evidence of ROR use in all of the likely places, including but not limited to Crossref and DataCite, about which more in a moment. And then what we do is we record details about those ROR uses and then let others know about it, either just for general information or perhaps as a model to emulate, that kind of thing. But in reality, over the last few years, as ROR has become more and more normalized, more and more common, a de facto standard in scholarly information, I find that ROR users and use cases keep jumping out at us all of a sudden from places we weren't expecting to find them, places I wasn't looking. Because the ROR API and dataset are entirely free and open, people don't need to ask us for permission to use them. And that's been a huge driver of ROR adoption. And it's a testament to the power of open data and open infrastructure. But it does mean that ROR users are often hiding from us in plain sight. Nevertheless, there are some key ROR adopters that I can share with you this year. Of course, Crossref is an operating organization of ROR, but it's still nevertheless the case that Crossref is continuing to facilitate new uses of ROR. And so one of the key things that happened early in the year is that Crossref adopted ROR so that Crossref members can use ROR IDs in place of funder IDs. Among software systems that have integrated ROR in 2025, we'd like to call out OJS 3.5. ROR is now built into the core code base of OJS 3.5, which is a very big deal. And OJS 3.5 is set to become the long-term support version of OJS very soon. Another major integration this year, Symplectic Elements, a research information management system, adopted ROR to identify what it calls external organizations for author affiliations and so on. And then another kind of really key, not exactly new adoption of ROR comes with the RAID project, which, as some of you may know, is a project to initiate persistent identifiers for research projects. RAID has been around for a little while, but this year it has really ramped up. And not only has RAID built its persistent identifier schema heavily around other persistent identifiers, including ROR, RAID now also has some nice pilots where they have user interface forms into which they've integrated ROR. The Doc ID initiative in Africa, part of the Africa PIT Alliance, a project at the Africa PIT Alliance, uses ROR as an organization identifier in its data model. And that data model is designed to connect locally created handles in Africa, regionally and thematically specific PIDs, and DOIs issued through the DOI Foundation. Finally, amongst the largest metadata users of ROR in 2025 are Fonds de Recherche de Québec, which is one of the major funders in Canada, and specifically in Quebec, which has registered over 20,000 grant DOIs with Crossref, and they're using ROR IDs to identify themselves as the funder, as well as the organizations of their awardees. Another user of ROR in metadata is Worldwide Protein Data Bank, which has registered 10 times that many DOIs with Crossref, just under 200,000 data sets with Crossref. And I'd like to call out the Research Data Alliance as well, which we heard a nice presentation about that at a community call earlier this year, which has built ROR into a lookup into its membership registration form. So lots of really key central users of ROR that we learned about this year. But here are some of the more sort of surprising, hidden, maybe smaller scale, but really interesting users of ROR that we learned about in 2025. These are the ones that are leaping out at us from the wide green field of scholarly information. And these can be some of the most interesting. So for instance, we're always keeping an eye out for the top organizations that are contributing ROR IDs to DataCite. But a repository like the Swedish National Data Service doesn't make it into that list of top contributors of ROR IDs. But still, they've really integrated ROR into their systems, which we sort of learned about this. It's a data service for an entire country. That's a key thing. That's a really important thing. Learning about this made me want to go through all countries in the world alphabetically to see if their national research services are using ROR, which is probably not an achievable goal, but a really interesting, fascinating, surprising, I think, use of ROR. Similarly, we were a little surprised this year to learn that NHS ambulance services in the UK need ROR IDs because ROR IDs are integrated into a tool called BMJ Research Analytics. ROR's phenomenal curation team, from whom you will hear more in a moment, created ROR IDs for several ambulance services before we even knew why they needed them. We're proud to learn that ROR IDs are going to help these services demonstrate the impact of their research. So what these surprises indicate to me is that ROR is becoming so pervasive that it's almost not realistic to imagine maintaining a comprehensive or even mostly comprehensive list of who's using ROR. So going forward, we're going to concentrate on highlighting selected ROR users in our communications and, of course, on contacting people who are not using ROR and should be. We do still regularly track use of ROR IDs in Crossref and DataCite metadata, and as of last year, we've been looking at ROR in ORCID as well. This chart gives you a high-level view of the increase in ROR IDs in these systems and how they're used. As you can see, the general trend is decidedly upward. The spike you see in Crossref, in ROR IDs in Crossref in June 2025 is the point at which the Worldwide Protein Data Bank began using ROR IDs in the data sets they register with Crossref. And as I mentioned, that's just under 200,000 data sets, which makes them the largest depositor of ROR IDs in Crossref metadata to date. Note that we are participating in a WDS organized webinar with the Worldwide Protein Data Bank next week as part of Love Data Week. The number of Crossref records with ROR IDs in any field has more than tripled in the last year, up to over 600,000 records, which is the largest rate of increase as compared to DataCite and ORCID this year. The number of DataCite records with ROR IDs in any field has also more than tripled, although it's slowed down somewhat after last year's mammoth data deposits by Japan's National Institute for Fusion Science. The number of ORCID records with ROR IDs has nearly doubled, but ORCID's product team reports that over 95% of new ORCID profiles include a ROR ID, especially since ORCID uses a ROR-powered suggestion for an author's primary affiliation based on their email domain at registration. ORCID just today released a really interesting announcement about increasing affiliation verification in ORCID, and I think that that's going to really bump these numbers up as well. So let's move on to how ROR is being used. So especially compared to 7 years ago, we're seeing more and more use cases for ROR. More systems are using ROR IDs as funder identifiers. In particular, repository systems such as the Open Science Framework and Mendeley Data / Digital Commons began the work of switching from Crossref Open Funder IDs to ROR IDs as funder identifiers in 2025. And again, we're going to hear from the Gray Initiative tomorrow in one of the annual meeting sessions, and you can learn a little bit more about that repository initiative and ROR in that session. ROR as a facility identifier was a hot topic this year. Our explainer post on RRIDs and ROR for facilities remains highly visited, and we participated in the NSF-supported workshop at NCAR this year on fair facilities and instruments to explain how and when ROR IDs can be used to identify research facilities. ROR is increasingly mentioned in research integrity initiatives, and ROR is a crucial factor that makes things like trust markers on ORCID profiles possible. The bibliometric, meta-research, and research on research communities are heavy and enthusiastic users of ROR and ROR IDs. ROR IDs underpin many high-profile bibliometric projects, such as the open edition of the Leiden rankings of universities. And finally, of course, going back to our origins, ROR IDs are still widely used to indicate the affiliations of corresponding authors, other authors, contributors of all kinds, and principal investigators. There's plenty of room for additional adoption, and we discussed that in detail and made some, steps forward at a 2025 roundtable on affiliation metadata that was co-sponsored by both Crossref and the OA Switchboard. And we have a link to the report from that session here. One of the top issues discussed at that roundtable might be expressed this way. Should ROR IDs be added upstream or downstream? Meaning, should ROR IDs be added early in the research lifecycle or later in the research lifecycle, really after the research has been conducted and published? Certainly, currently, the reality is that ROR IDs are being used both upstream and downstream. Upstream, repository systems, research data providers, and certain conscientious and excellent publishers are already doing a great job of providing ROR IDs as early as possible and making sure that they're available in DOI metadata for consumption by downstream services. Another upstream place where ROR IDs can be incorporated is in manuscript submission systems, and some of them do use ROR, but not all of them. We have high hopes that ROR IDs will be incorporated into Silverchair's Scholar 1 soon, potentially this year, but we'll wait and see about that. ORCID is an interesting case because when ORCID profiles are used to register in systems, the ROR IDs can, in theory, be extracted from that, being an upstream sort of provider of ROR IDs. But ORCID also consumes Crossref metadata and metadata from other places, so it's also a downstream user of ROR IDs. So a really key sort of system. As for downstream uses of ROR, meaning primarily systems that use large-scale automatic processes to normalize organization names by matching them to ROR IDs, OpenAlex has been and continues to be a leader in this area, but we're seeing even more movement in these kinds of large-scale automatic matching efforts. We ourselves released an updated version of the matching strategy that's available through the ROR API. We released that in the last quarter of 2025, and we're already seeing at least one very enthusiastic adopter of that strategy. Perhaps most importantly, in the coming months and years, Crossref plans to implement large-scale automatic matching of ROR IDs to names in its metadata, first to funder names, and then eventually to organization names and affiliations. And that's going to be a game changer for the prevalence of ROR IDs in scholarly information systems. So lastly, why is ROR being used? And that is simple. Because we're the leading open registry of persistent identifiers for research organizations. We have open, easy to implement tools and services that provide access to extremely high quality data. And to learn more about what it takes to maintain that high quality of data, I'm going to pass things off to Riley Marsh, our metadata manager. Riley?
Thank you, Amanda. I am Riley Marsh. I'm ROR's metadata manager. I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of curation at ROR now and how it fits into the work that we do. So as you may know, curation is how records get created and kept accurate over time in ROR. So that includes our new organization records, our updates to existing records, any more complex changes like depreciation. But most of this work, deprecation, most of this work comes to us through curation requests submitted by the community, and it's a huge part, obviously, of how ROR stays reliable and usable. But the story of ROR's growth in the past year is, as in all years prior, a story of community collaboration and the power that results from all of us working together on a shared goal. Since the end of 2024, the registry has grown by over 8,600 organizations, bringing us to more than 120,000 records. And this growth was fueled by a remarkable level of community engagement. In 2025, we processed over 12,200 user-submitted curation requests, including more than 6,500 new records and over 3,100 updates. But beyond any numbers, what has always motivated us is how this growth happens and the story that it tells us about this community's investment in ROR. This steady increase in curation volume is a great sign of adoption, but it also means that we have to be thoughtful about how we prioritize and document decisions and make the process as clear and efficient as possible for users and for us. And we've been focusing on improving guidance around requests and making the workflow more sustainable, given our size and our resources. And as part of that, we published a blog post walking through the journey of a curation request. I'm linking it in the chat now. Which walks through, obviously, the journey of a curation request from submission all the way to the end when it's closed to make the process as transparent as possible. And we have some more posts in our how-to blog series on the way this year. I'm going to pass it off to Adam, who's going to dig into more details about what we're seeing in our data, about our process improvements, and what we're doing next. So I'll hand it over to him now.
Thanks, Riley. Adam Buttrick, product manager for ROR here. So to start things off, I want to talk about this year's curation activities through a regional lens. Highlighting what's really possible when local communities partner with ROR to create a better representation of themselves in open infrastructure. So as we talk through these next numbers, it's really important to reflect on how much they represent hours of work by librarians, researchers, administrators, many others from around the world to ensure that their institutions are included in the registry. Where those efforts have also been specifically and quite valuably focused is on helping us address Western-centric biases inherited from our seed data, such that the regional growth patterns you're about to see are a strong indication of those being unwound and the community's work on this aspect really bearing fruit. Next slide, please. Okay, so starting off, curation activities in East Asia led all regions with about 19% growth. This was driven in no small part by a great partnership we have with the National Institute of Science and Technology Policy in Japan, where our work to reconcile their national level organization registry resulted in the largest increase for any country, adding nearly 1,800 new organizations and constituting a 44% jump over 2024. Work on records in South Korea also contributed significantly to this region's growth, adding 270 new organizations for a 16% overall increase, driven by a really equally great partnership with folks from the Korea Institute of Science and Technology Information. Both of these partners will be speaking at tomorrow's session on the role of ROR in national research strategies. So please make sure to attend that to learn all about the great work that they've been doing. Next slide. So growth in the representation of African organizations improved by about 10%, driven by both organic interest and the dedicated efforts of Joy Owango's team at the Training Center and Communication at the University of Nairobi. These folks have really dedicated a great deal of time and effort to improve the representation of African funding and research organizations in ROR, so we really cannot thank them enough for their efforts. In both the Southeast and Central Asia, we saw a growth of approximately 15%, reflecting new kind of organic engagement from institutions across these regions. We also added nearly 3,000 new organizations in Western Europe, led predominantly by activity from Portugal and France. But this region was already well represented in our data, such that this still immensely valuable kind of curation activity reflects more a fleshing out of things like organizational hierarchies, as opposed to a significant year-over-year increase. Next slide, please. But really, this level of global engagement is also evident in how rich and connected ROR's data has become. So on the relationship front, we added over 8,500 new relationships, as well as continued our expansion of external identifier coverage, where we've added thousands of new ISNI mappings, Wikidata links, and funder ID connections. One of our biggest wins this year was also in domain coverage, where we added domain metadata to over 9,700 records, which is about a 146% increase over the prior year. This improvement came as a result of multiple efforts. So ORCID provided us with some really valuable domain data that we were able to reconcile and integrate. We also pursued our own domain reconciliation from other authoritative sources. And our curation team has really made it a priority to try and include domain information as part of every single request that comes through. Next slide. Looking ahead to the next year, we'll continue working to grow and leverage our relationships with this community to keep our data as high quality and complete as possible, including cultivating new relationships in those emerging regions I mentioned where we're seeing that organic interest in ROR take shape. On the technical side of our curation work, we'll be implementing new forms of automation to help us close quality and completeness gaps and improve overall coverage. For example, one of the most successful interventions we found with our ORCID domain data in terms of kind of downstream user impact was prioritizing adding those updates relative to the amount of use an organization sees on their platform. So now what we're doing is we're also looking into what extent we can leverage similar signals in Crossref, DataCite, OpenAlex to drive things like additional variant names and make other improvements. The ORCID domain work was also instructive in showing us how we can pursue automated link and domain updates for the rest of our records. So we think really there's some potential here to help us focus our efforts kind of where they'll have the greatest impact. Last but not least, in 2025, we had the opportunity to support specific data quality improvements relative to the great work being done by signatories of the Barcelona Declaration. So we're looking to advance this further on a number of fronts with initial focus on improving the representation of global funding organizations in the registry, which is part of a work stream we're co-leading with some folks on that side. Next slide, please. As I said at the outset, all of this work is really made possible by everyone on this call today. Every curation request, every collaboration, every form of contribution strengthens the registry for everyone. ROR is really, in all the best ways, a collective effort, and we're grateful to be part of such an engaged and growing global community. Next slide, please. Okay, so moving on to our product efforts this year, I want to briefly frame ROR's core offering, since that shapes everything we do. Can we pull up my next one? So at its heart, ROR exists to provide a high-quality open infrastructure for identifying research and funding organization. So this work really consists of three interconnected pieces. First, the registry itself, a comprehensive open data set of more than 120,000 organizations. Then a suite of tools designed for making use of that data, most notably, of course, our API-net services, to support a wide range of search and affiliation matching use cases. And then last, but again, not least, ongoing transparent curation and enrichment processes where the registry is continuously improved through community feedback and various internal efforts. Next slide. So with that framing in mind, our work in 2025 was really about simplifying and strengthening ROR's foundation. The centerpiece of those efforts was completing the deprecation of the V1 schema, which was accomplished with minimal disruption to users through a quite long end-of-life period and two-phase removal, where we switched the default API version mid-year and then fully removed version 1 in December. Here, I do want to pause to thank and acknowledge everyone who put in the work to migrate their systems over the course of this transition. We do know that it was significant effort across the community, but it's one that has real positive downstream effects for what we're able to do going forward, which I'll come back to in just a moment. Next slide. But in 2025, we also made very important improvements to our API infrastructure, introducing a new caching layer that greatly improved overall efficiency and performance. And in collaboration with Crossref, we launched a new matching strategy that Amanda talked about, designed by their brilliant kind of team over there, that's faster, more efficient, and better performing than ROR's existing affiliation matching. We also began our initial work on client identification as part of our efforts to ensure API stability and efficiency as usage continues to grow. Next slide, please. So what does this all kind of set us up for in 2026? Quite a bit, actually. No longer having to produce data in two schema versions really greatly reduces the overall complexity, which we want to leverage to further improve our curation and data publication infrastructure, supporting that rising demand that we saw at the top and cutting down on request processing times. As part of this, as I mentioned, we'll be focusing on bringing even more automation into our data review and release processes. Next slide. On the matching side, we'll be making single search the default matching strategy in Q1 of this year. We've been getting some great and positive feedback from our users on this new strategy. And one thing that we've also learned from rolling out both it and that caching layer I mentioned is that their combined impact on API stability and performance is far greater than we had anticipated. So the combined gains we're seeing from matching and caching changes mean that we can also now take a little bit more time to get the implementation right on our client identification, making sure that the registration process is as robust and user-friendly as it needs to be. There's no kind of bugs or interactions. So instead of Q1, we're targeting kind of Q3 for the full implementation of client identification. Next slide, please. These API-focused improvements I've been discussing reflect the fact that most of our users interact with ROR programmatically or on the basis of kind of total user activity in API-first service. For example, in just the past month, we processed over 14.6 million API requests, representing a 12% increase over the median month last year. And nearly half of those requests, about 7 million, were affiliation matching calls, speaking really to how central that functionality has become to systems integrating ROR. But a new trend we're also seeing is a significant growth in advanced query usage, now standing at about 1.4 million requests. So we're going to try and pay a bit more attention to user activity there to see how it can be further improved and refined. If you're newly making use of advanced query functionality, and especially doing it so at scale, we'd love to hear more about it so we can help guide those efforts. So please reach out to us. Next slide. But we also know that plenty of folks spend time in our UI directly, kind of, especially as part of community curation activities. So we're planning a refresh there as well, including support for that advanced search functionality and kind of similar features. We'll be running user sessions to solicit feedback on this UI refresh, so stay tuned on that front. And we hope that folks will participate in kind of helping us to shape what this new and fresh view of the ROR web search will look like. But all of this really kind of connects to a broader theme for 2026, which is doing the work that's necessary to rise to meet our place in the world as essential open infrastructure. So as ROR becomes more deeply embedded in the research ecosystem, our goal is to make sure that our technical foundations can support that role for the long term. What this means is a lot of very important backend upgrades to ensure all of our code bases are robust, modern, well-tested, and even more performant. So I'm now going to turn things over to our technical lead, Joseph Rhodes, to discuss more about that work.
I'm just going to interject for a moment, Adam. Thanks so much. I think that Joseph is having some technical difficulties. So are you able to continue until he
Sure.
can rejoin?
Yes, I will cover his slides.
Okay.
I think I'm back.
Oh, you're
Oh,
back.
Joseph is back. Okay.
Welcome back.
Don't have video. Lost power for a second. Sorry about that.
Take it away, Joseph.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Hi, folks. This is Joseph Rhodes, the new technical lead here for ROR. I joined ROR in September, but I've been in the open scholarly infrastructure community for much longer than that. Most recently, that's been at DataSite for the past 4 years, where I've worked on the search experience for both the APIs as well as from the UI side and DataSite Commons. I'm excited to be here in 2026 with all of you as the ROR project evolves from proving that it works, proving that the model works, to scaling the impact in the scholarly community. The technical roadmap focuses on making sure that our core technologies and infrastructure match that. Next slide, please. The core of our backend technology is built all around Python, Django, and Elasticsearch. We're going to be concentrating on solidifying this core with some upgrades. Our goals here include increasing our service reliability, lowering maintenance time, and making sure we're ready to change as the community continues to grow. Next slide, please. In addition to solidifying our core API technologies, we'll be looking at refreshing the search experience at ROR.org. Along with the work that Adam previously described, we'll be looking at modernizing our underlying UI architecture. We're looking to embrace a more modular architecture, being able to reuse components both that we develop and those we're able to pull in from different available libraries. Our second goal here is to shorten the time between feature request and deployment. And the third is to be able to adapt and extend the UI, enabling more complex data-rich features. Next slide, please. With that in mind, here's a rough outline of what the year should look like and what you can expect. In the first corner, as Adam mentioned, we'll be looking at launching single search as the default affiliation matching scheme. In the first and second quarter, we'll be working on those core technologies that I mentioned. Third quarter will be where you'll see client identification coming out more. And in that third and fourth quarter, you'll notice a lot more UI modernization and modularization going on. Or, yeah. So with that, next slide.
Yeah. Thank
And
you,
back to Maria.
Joseph. Yeah. Thanks, Joseph. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Riley. Thanks, Amanda, for laying out all of these exciting things that are happening in different corners of the ROR universe right now, and also as we look ahead. So we have a little bit of time left in the session today to hear from all of you who have joined us. If you have any particular questions that you would like to ask, anything that you would like to hear more about from any of the topics that we just covered, or anything you were hoping to hear about that we didn't cover that you want to ask us. And I also want to invite anyone and everyone to share with us and with everyone else here if you have any news or announcements related to ROR from your corner of the world. And if you want to share what's on your ROR roadmap in 2026. So this is an opportunity in the spirit of the open community calls that we do to have a discussion and a conversation and hear what people are doing with ROR and what ROR enabling. So I will see if there are any questions. You are welcome to post anything in the chat, or if you would like to ask the question live, you're welcome to raise your hand and we can unmute you. So anything you'd like to share, anything you'd like to ask, anything you'd like to know more about? Okay.
Hello, can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm from Kingston. I would like to know, so how can ROR help us to conduct scientific research if we, for example, work with scientific articles? So our teachers, they write scientific reports and publish their articles in our journal. So how can ROR help us?
I can address
You
that.
go ahead.
Yeah. So what sifts? How is your journal published? Who publishes your journal? Yeah.
So we have some editorial boards, and we have 3 journals for teachers, and we
Yes, but
work
what is the software that enables them to be published?
we want to join to Web of Science, but we haven't joined yet.
Well, this is probably a conversation for email. I can email you afterward. What we find is that a lot of journals are using open journal systems as their journal publishing platform. Web of Science is not itself a journal publishing platform. Web of Science just indexes those journals. So the key thing is that when you get DOIs for those journal articles, that the ROR ID is embedded in that DOI metadata so that systems like Web of Science can pick it up, which makes your journal articles more visible when people are looking for research. But all of that is really dependent on some technical things. And so if you don't mind, I will email you after this call and we can work on that.
Okay, thank you. We have been added into ROR, but we haven't done any other things yet.
Right. Yes. And having that ROR ID for your organization is a really key thing. But then the key thing is going to be making sure that the DOIs for those journal articles include ROR IDs. And so we can talk about how to make that happen, but it can be quite technical. All right. Thanks for that. We have a conversation going on in the chat about our proposal to link ROR IDs to UEI. I think Riley has responded to that. Adam, is that something you might want to address?
Yeah, so we're treating the addition of new external identifiers as kind of a stretch goal for 2026. What we found relative to our engagement on it last year is that some of the national level initiatives weren't quite really where we wanted them to be in order to kind of make that work kind of an immediate priority. We're going to keep track of it over Q1 and Q2 to see how we can fold it in. The good news is that the addition of our the addition of new external identifiers to our schema does not require a schema versioning process, or does not require a new schema version for the versioning process we kind of outlined and defined by this community. So it's actually not an extensive amount of work to go in and kind of slot those in, but we want to make sure that when we're doing it in the most thoughtful and valuable way. So it's not something that we're kind of incrementally kind of having to revisit. So addition of UEIs, addition of other national level identifiers kind of slots in there.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Looks like there is some discussion in the chat about levels of granularity in ROR and ROR scope. I will just say, and others may want to chime in, I know that this is, kind of a perennial topic and continues to be an evolving one for ROR as the key focus when we launched, and key focus since then has really been on doing the most effective and comprehensive job possible at addressing the organization and institutional level identification use case for a variety of purposes. And we have made some adjustments to the scope and conclusion inclusion since then to accommodate newer types of use cases and organizations, such as focusing more on publishers and funders. We're really continuing to keep on top of continue to make sure that we're scoping at the right level to address the right amount of use cases in the most useful way possible for the global community. So we're always interested in engaging in the topic of department level identification. We do recommend that when it comes to metadata collection and system integrations, that organization level metadata is treated separately as department level metadata. So we're not in a situation where a ROR ID can't be captured if it's not associated with a department. So I appreciate the question. I don't know if Adam or others want to add any other commentary to that, but it's definitely appreciated.
Yeah, no, I think that Maria is correct. The thing that I will say is that in doing any of this work and kind of relative to those regional trends that I was also discussing, that there's always a trade-off, meaning, there are these huge disparities in the representation of research organizations at the level of ROR's original scope that still exist out there in the landscape. And these have really large kind of downstream impact on research assessment, the visibility of research. And so when we think about how we can spend our time and devote our curation activities and efforts, we really have to kind of try and strike a balance between those things. So, we have to choose, do we try and be as inclusive and kind of globally representative at the existing scope? Do we expand hierarchies? I think we've done a good job of striking that balance and really kind of growing the representation of relationships over the course of the past few years. As I mentioned, we added about 8,500 new, and this kind of represents a lot of activity around the addition of things like facilities and centers, especially in Western Europe. But again, we have to kind of stay focused, stick to our scope to make sure that we can actually really be a truly kind of inclusive and globally representative registry.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Very well put. Yeah, thanks again for the question. Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind addressing that as well. This is something that I hear from a lot of ROR users. One of the things that I always think about with this is that if you think about like the enormous amount of work that our curators do to manually review all of these requests for changes that we're getting to these sort of higher level and subsidiary units like research institutions, the idea of doing that at the department and faculty level on a global level, I think is not possible for a centralized curation model. One of the things I wonder is whether it would be possible and eventually to do some kind of way of linking ROR IDs to non-centrally curated identifiers, whether that would be ISNI or Wikidata or even some kind of new identifier, and have that be separate. Say, ROR is not responsible for these departmental listings because they change so much. You take a university, departments open, close, rename themselves. Faculties are maybe a bit more persistent, but really it's just not possible to maintain that on a global level. So I don't know. I'd just be interested to hear what people think about that, because that central curation model to me is just simply not scalable at that level.
Yeah, definitely a good point. All right, I think that's last call for questions. And if there are additional questions, I encourage you to hang out on this Zoom. Just stay on the Zoom after we officially conclude, and we're happy to chat more about anything. I want to acknowledge a few comments that I'm seeing posted by John and by Howard and by Michael, just sharing some updates and announcements about exciting integrations. So thank you for sharing that. Really, really happy to see these developments, and you know that we are always here to provide guidance and support and documentation. So the final question for today's session is one for all of you who are here. And it's a very important and existential question. Are you all ready to roar in 2026? We hope that you are, and we look forward to seeing what that looks like for all of you. And if you have been part of these annual community calls in the past, you know that we are about to conclude the session with a special ROR tradition that I invite you to join me in participating in. So here's how it's going to work. We are going to invite you to go on video if you would like. It's not required, but it's more fun if you go on video. And I'm going to remind Amanda to stop the screen sharing so that we can grab a screenshot. And so if you are ready to roar in 2026, we invite you to come on camera. And first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to raise your right hand. And the second thing I'm going to ask you to do is to raise your left hand. I'm also realizing that Zoom's automation might add a lot of hands to our screens, so lots of extra hands. So now you can make both of your hands into the best lion paw that you possibly can. I want everyone to look really fierce and really fabulous. These are so great. Okay, and on the count of three, we are all going to give our very best Zoom roar with our fierce lion paws. And you can be on mute or off mute, up to you. If you're off mute, it'll be chaos, but that's okay. That's what we're here for. So are you ready to roar? 1, 2, 3, roar! All right, very well done. You have officially helped us celebrate another year of ROR. Look ahead to the year to come. We will meet back here in a year to celebrate yet again. And in the meantime, it will continue to happen. We have calls throughout the year. We are always available to answer questions and provide support We also want to continue hearing from you, what questions you have, what use cases you want to raise. So please keep in touch, and thank you again for making ROR possible.